Hello everybody, my name is John Mark Johnson Jr. I'm the host of Reformed GGA, and today I'm here to give you guys an update on my GF4 AK from Palmetto State Armory. Which is nowhere to be found. And that basically is the gist of the update. The reason why I do not have my GF4 anymore is simply because it had a flaw that frankly I didn't feel like taking the time, money, and energy to fix. And that was that it turns out that the barrel was actually fundamentally bent relative to the receiver. As you guys who have been following know, I've been having some trouble getting the gun properly zeroed, and you know, there were all kinds of things that I thought might possibly be an issue. But long story short, after investigating the handguard, that was one issue, and eventually got the handguard to kind of sort of work. But after that, I wound up discovering through dealing with other handguards on that particular gun that the barrel itself was actually misaligned relative to the receiver. It was bent off to the side. And it was actually bent so far out of true that the red dot that I was using to sight it in, that I was using as an optic system for it, actually didn't have enough adjustability to go to where the gun was actually shooting, and therefore you wound up with parallax issues and just not being able to zero the gun. And long story short, basically shy of reinstalling the barrel, that gun was not going to shoot properly with that optic. Now, of course, one of the options would have been to get a different optic that had more adjustability built into it. The gun was perfectly functional in terms of actually firing the rounds and whatnot. It just was misaligned relative to the receiver, and so if you wanted to get it to be aimed from an optic that was mounted to the receiver, more specifically the rail dust cover, you would have to have something with more adjustability than that red dot. Okay. That would at least involve buying another optic. Another option was to simply move the red dot, because it's a red dot, out to the handguard, and it did originally come with a railed handguard, but as I mentioned in another video, that the only way that I got that railed handguard to actually work was to actually loosen it up just a little bit, and so it actually wasn't all that tight, which means it wouldn't have held zero particularly well either. So I'm either looking at buying a different optic or less than optimal zero. That was kind of the general situation that I was working with, and you guys know my financial situation as it is now. I have to be kind of picky and choosy with where I spend my money. And so instead of sinking even more time and money into that project, I decided to get out where the getting was good, find someone who was willing to take it off my hands, who's willing to deal with the issues, and not me. I'm not willing to deal with the issues and not willing to spend more time and money on that. And that leads me to a broader conclusion, and that is that while my relationship with PSA has been rocky for a while, because literally every gun that I have bought from them that they've actually made, not reselling somebody else's guns. For example, I have a Hellcat that I bought from them that is functioning fine. Trigger is atrocious, but it functions fine and no significant issues with it. But anything that they've designed and built, I've had issues with, of one form or another. There's only a couple of their guns that I actually still have now. Well, actually I should take that back. A few of their guns that I still have now, 3, and only 2 of them actually work fairly well. The other one's a little dodgy, but semi-okay-ish. But yeah, my relationship with them has been rocky for a while, and this recent issue with the GF4 has just made me decide that I'm going to hold off on getting PSA guns for the indefinite future. I like PSA in a lot of ways, and I've bought a lot of merchandise from them. But most of their merchandise I will wind up selling to someone else who's willing to deal with issues that I'm not willing to deal with. And you have to eventually at some point stop and say, hey, why am I putting so much time and energy into this company when they're not treating me as a customer very well? Like I said, literally every gun that they've designed and produced that I've bought has had an issue. You really have to stop and say, is this company really worth investing in anymore? And I'm going to go ahead and say no. Okay, I don't think that really comes as a surprise to anyone. You know, I've given them a really good, thorough look, and like I said, I've bought a lot of different guns from them, and had issues with all of them. No. And in fact, I decided to give them another chance recently, and, you know, get something small from them and hope that that would turn out and maybe kind of reinstill my faith, and that didn't work out. So I got a couple of parts sets from PSA for AKs. One was little extractor kits, and the other one was a firing pin kit. You know, it's always nice to have those kinds of spare parts around and those kinds of things. And there's other people whose guns I know who have AKs like I do, and you know, having spare parts like that is always a good thing. And so I figure, well, you know, I'm definitely not willing to invest a whole new gun in PSA given all the issues that I had in the beginning and have had for a while now. But maybe at least they can get, you know, the parts right. Well, these parts are still in the package that they arrived in. And they come with a very interesting feature. I don't know if you can see that. This is the extractor. There's little flaky looking things on there. That's rust. So let's go ahead and open this package. I have not opened this yet, so this will be new for both of us. Let's take out this extractor and get a really good look at it there. Let's see if I can get the camera to refocus here. Yeah, all those little flakes that you're seeing on it, that's rust that it came with in the package. Makes you, excuse me, makes you have just all kinds of confidence in them. That side is particularly nasty. Let's see if we can get a little bit different light on it. Yeah, all that. That is all little bits of rust. That is rather unpleasant. Let's take a look at the firing pin. Okay, so like I said, haven't opened these packages yet, so I haven't been exposed to any of the Idaho Air. Yeah, that one is definitely pretty obvious. It's one side. Yeah, that edge is pretty terrible. There's the other side. And let's see if we can get that edge. That edge is a little better. Let's see, maybe it was a lighting issue. Yeah, kind of a lighting issue. But yeah, very, very, very obvious rust. PSA, I really, really, really want to like you guys. Okay, like I said, I've bought lots of your products. I bought an AKV from you guys, but it had feeding issues with your own magazines and with some ammunition. I think Winchester was one of the ones that had problems with, and also some of the Wolf heavily lacquered cases had issues with. It also had light problems with light primer strikes, I think with the Remington ammunition and with the Winchester as well. So yeah, that didn't work out overly great. The GF3 it's working pretty good now, but initially it was kind of a jam-o-matic. It had some major feeding problems, and I've had to file on various parts inside the gun in order to loosen things up enough for it to operate correctly. And I'm not talking about a little bit of polishing. I'm talking about grabbing an actual file and taking it to the underside of the bolt carrier and the hammer and things like that. The AKP was horribly misaligned, and it's still horribly misaligned. I still know the person who has it now, which is not me. And that one had to do a lot of file work on as well, and it's working semi-decently now, but it doesn't run perfectly. It still has problems with extraction issues, stovepiping, and that kind of thing from time to time. It's not nearly as often as it was, but from time to time it still has issues with that. So yeah, that one wasn't perfect exactly at all. The KS-47, the extractor broke within the first 500 rounds, and Palmetto State Armory gave me the runaround on trying to get the part fixed, and eventually I wound up going out and getting my own aftermarket part for it because PSA was incredibly unreliable in getting anything to me, so I got my own part to replace it, and so far it's been doing good, but I haven't exactly put a lot of rounds through it because I kind of don't trust it, and it also chews up self-defense ammo just because it's more of an AR thing than it is necessarily a Palmetto thing, but overall didn't wind up being that great of an option. And then let's see here, the 103 also did not have the right clearances between the bolt carrier group and the fire control group, particularly the hammer, and so it needed a little bit of filing as well. Not nearly as much, thankfully, and so far that gun has been absolutely terrific, but like I said, it didn't come in spec. It didn't come right, and so it did have to be fixed. So that one was probably the one that was closest to perfect, but still not quite perfect. And then, let's see, after that, I think that was the GF4 after the 103. I think, almost feel like I'm forgetting something in there, or maybe a few somethings, but and then finally the GF4 with a misaligned barrel that could not be sighted to a red dot mounted on the rail dust cover. And like I said, there are technically fixes that could have worked for that scenario because it actually was reliable, and the clearances between the bolt carrier group and the fire control group were actually correct on that one, which is a very pleasant surprise. Lots of good things about it, but the barrel was out of spec enough that it didn't work with my red dot, and yeah. Just not impressed in general. And like I said, eventually you have to take stock of what you're doing and say, even though I like the company and I like what they stand for, at least on paper, you know, getting as many guns out to average American citizens as possible, especially of the so-called scary types, to make sure that they're in common use, which on prior precedents of law kind of would give us an advantage in the courts. I like all of that, but the problem is that they just put out junk. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the truth. At least with the kinds of guns that I've been going after, which has been mostly the AK types or the 7.62x39 types. Obviously, I don't have experience with every single thing in the product lineup, etc., etc. But the kinds of guns that I've been interested in, that I've bought from them, I've had issues with every single one. Some of them very minor, like the AK-103. It was literally just a bit of filing here and there, and it is now running very smoothly. Very accurate gun, very reliable gun. No major issues with it now whatsoever. But at the beginning, it wasn't quite in spec. So very minor issues to very major issues, like a barrel being completely out of alignment with the receiver. Oh, it's an AK. It's not supposed to be right. Well, there is a certain amount of truth to that, and the AKs are usually not completely true, but if they're going to be a value, they have to be at least zeroable somehow. And like I said, in previous videos, I'm just not at a point financially where I really want to chase those kinds of things anymore. And if PSA cannot produce something that is not going to be a money pit for me, there's really no use in me pursuing them. And even when I gave them a chance to redeem themselves with these parts that I ordered, they managed to send me rusty parts. Like I said, these were in sealed packages, their own little Ziploc bags. How on earth you got to have rusty parts right out of the factory is mind-boggling to me. Either they had rusted there at the factory and somebody still had the audacity to put them in a bag and send them to me, or they were not rusty at the factory, but they were sealed in air that obviously contained a fairly high amount of moisture, which means that the factory floor does not have a properly air-conditioned room, and, well, that can happen. Either case, they're not a high-quality company. This is like a rookie-level mistake. If you have these parts and you're storing them in an area where moisture is going to get to them, at least do the end buyer the courtesy of covering these things in Cosmoline or something, like plenty of other companies do. I've ordered spare parts from other companies, and they usually do put Cosmoline on them, or some kind of packing grease, or even just plain old mineral oil. It's not overly expensive, it's not overly fancy, but it does work as a good preservative. They could have at least done that to make sure that these things didn't rust out, but they couldn't even manage that much. I mean, that's just terrible. What good is a rusty firing pin? What good is a rusty extractor? I will probably soak these in some chemicals that I have and see if I can redeem them, just so that I can get back the cost of the piece. And I know Palmetto State Armory has this wonderful guarantee, and they'll fix all of your problems. Well, first of all, getting a hold of them is a pain. And then they usually want you to send back whatever the problem was. A lot of times, well, sometimes they'll pay it in order, so I won't get into that. But it's just a headache, and I don't have time for this, and I certainly don't have the money for this. Okay, so Palmetto, indefinitely, I'm not going to be buying anything from you except for the things, the one little area that you have shown to me where you actually know what you're doing, and that is magazines. These 103 magazines that Palmetto has produced that came with the GF4, not this particular one, I bought this one separately, but I was actually really impressed with these 103 magazines, and so I bought a few more of them because these actually do work, and they work well, and they have good reinforcements, they have good durability. These are definitely superior to most of the common Magpul magazines. Even the more advanced Magpul magazines, these are better than, because these ones actually do have reinforced feed lips, whereas at least as I understand it, the Gen 3 Magpuls do not have reinforced feed lips. They do have reinforced front and rear tabs on the Magpuls, but they don't have the reinforced feed lips, and the PSAs do. And not only that, but also their U9 magazines for the old, now it's the old Evo Scorpion, Evo 3S1 CZ Scorpion magazines. Those magazines also work fine, and they have enough metal reinforcement in the right place, primarily the feed lips. The rest of it is very much so polymer. Good design, works very reliably, also low cost, and I've been very impressed with the PSA magazines. I'm trying to give credit where credit is due, and so yeah, I'm not going to stop buying these kinds of things, because frankly, they did really good on these things. The PSA magazines, whether it be the U9 or the AK103 magazines, both of those have been very solid designs in my experience, and have worked very reliably and have good durability and good lifespan. I'm just fine with those. But any of their actual AK guns and also gun parts, AK gun parts, no, they suck. Okay, like I said, literally every gun that I've bought from them that's been one of their designs, that's, you know, kind of in that 7.62x39 AK realm, they're just terrible at. They can't ever send me a gun that is actually right. And I've got to cut my losses. You guys know that. I just don't have the budget for it anymore. I like, you know, that they're an American company and they're trying to arm as many Americans as possible with American-made guns. That's a great goal, but please don't give us crap. Okay, if you need to charge more, fine, as long as we actually get something that's worth getting. But like I said, every single gun has had at least an issue. Might not have been a very big issue like with the 103, basically just needed a little bit of filing, very little, and a little bit of polishing, and then it was good to go. Or very major issues where the barrel isn't properly aligned, or the whole gun is basically kind of cattywampus like the AKP. I don't have the time for that anymore. I don't have the money for that anymore. And so I'm cutting my losses and saying goodbye to PSA. It's been nice, and the guns that I do still have that are running okay, fine. I'm not going to get rid of something that's actually functional and worthwhile, but I'm not going to be getting any new guns from them anytime soon. I might wind up buying a few mags from them sometime soon, but guns and gun parts, not so much. Alright guys, thank you very much for your time and attention. For those of you who are in Christ, go with God and be blessed. For those of you who are not, I pray that you would come to know Him, the only genuine Savior of mankind. Amen.